All right, welcome again to the second annual debate or conversation between the San Francisco Collective and I Debate Rwanda. My name is Sage. I'm so excited to be here with you today and to be doing a little hosting of this event. So, we are going to be having a conversation that is around the resolution, My Country's National Identity Represents Me. So we have a few folks from City College of San Francisco and San Francisco State, and we have a few folks from I Debate Rwanda who are going to be taking us through a very interesting conversation, kind of getting a little back and forth, so that hopefully we can come to a greater understanding about a country's national identity, about intercultural communication in general, and just about the sharing and expressing of ideas. So I have a little, I have like a format for how things are going to go. But first, I would really love for our debaters to introduce themselves. So if we could start with the folks from I Debate Rwanda, who will we be hearing from today? Maybe Adelph, if we start with you, and then if you'd like to kind of popcorn to the other folks who will be speaking on behalf of I Debate Rwanda.
Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little quiet.
How about now?
That's great.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Adele Frugundana, and I am the International Programs Coordinator at iDebate. And I'm really happy to be here and to have our students participate in such an thoughtful discussion with your students. It's a really good thing for them and a good opportunity for them to share ideas around the world. So I'm really happy for this debate and can't wait to see what they all got. And yeah, I wish everyone good luck. So I'll let them start introducing themselves. We can start with Enoch, then Joel, then Audrey, then Abdul. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Enoch Taganda, and I'm a speaker on iDebate. Recently graduated high school.
Hey guys, am I audible? Yeah, okay. Well, hi, my name is, well, you can see my name before, but I guess I'll say, yeah, my name is Joel and I go by him. I've been part of iDebate since like my, let's say, 8th grade. And yeah, I'm now a high school graduate and yeah, I'm really excited for this discussion.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Hi, my name is Audrey Gatera, and I'll be a speaker for I Debate Rwanda, and I am so excited.
Hello, my name is Mujisha Abdul Karim. I'm also a speaker for I Debate Rwanda, and I also look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Awesome. And congratulations to those of you who just graduated high school. That is a huge deal. And I am so proud of you and so excited to have you here. So now on the San Francisco Collective side, Komal, I'd love for you to go first, and then Laura, and then Kirsten.
Hi, everybody. I'm Komal. I'm here on the San Francisco State University side, and I'm super excited to be here and have this sort of discussion. Yeah, super excited to meet all of you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura. I'm at CCSF, City College of San Francisco. I'm a political science major, so I love talking about power and who has it and who doesn't. So I'm very excited to be working with y'all today and talking and discussing.
Hi, my name is Kirsten. I'm a senior at San Francisco State University, and I'll be graduating on May 27th.
Amazing. Congratulations, Kirsten. Okay, awesome. Well, without further ado, because we really want to get to this. So we're gonna do 5-minute speeches on each side. We're gonna start with San Francisco, the San Francisco Collective. We'll go back and forth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And then we'll do kind of a period of open dialogue amongst the participants for about 10 minutes. And then we'll do an audience question and answer, or just kind of comment and excitements and what you kind of thought for another 10 minutes. And then we'll hear some concluding remarks from iDebate Rwanda. So from San Francisco State University and/or City College of San Francisco, you've got 5 minutes. Komal, maybe you'd like to get us started.
Sure. We're just discussing the
we're discussing the resolution. I mean, it doesn't have to be just you. Also, again, it's like a informal debate kind of style. So if Kirsten or Laura wants to pop in, or Komal, you want to kind of tap over to the others, that is totally fine. I'm just going to pop the resolution into the chat again. My country's national identity represents me. So hopefully you've kind of got some nice little brain juice going from thinking about all the things that folks said that are a part of a national identity. And so, yeah, speak from your heart, your mind, your brain, and from the US context, I guess, whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm gonna give my little piece and then hand it over to Laura. So the idea that my country's national identity represents me is, not me choking. It's such a true statement because, within a country, I believe that it's at its very core, the people is what makes the country, whether it comes to ideals, religion, foods, anything that's culturally involved in a country comes down to its people. So how its people kind of move, think, it's how the country moves. I'm gonna give it to Laura.
I had a lot of thoughts about this, and I actually wrote a little something. But first of all, I do believe that your country really represents what you're doing, who you are, but I don't think it represents me. I think that this country represents a lot of things, and a lot of them are really negative, and a lot of them don't really truly reflect the people that are in America. I wrote that until very recently, until 2015, I wouldn't be able to marry my partner. It's still legal in a lot of places for me to have conversion therapy, for me to be brainwashed or tortured, essentially, for who I love. That doesn't represent me. Furthermore, if that's not something I could be hate crime for, then being Asian American, being Chinese American, certainly is. Especially in San Francisco, where I live, that's something that happens quite frequently. And that certainly doesn't represent me. Or if it does, it represents that I'm not wanted in this country, that, we put children in little cages. Like, that's something a lot of people are proud of. That certainly does not represent me. Or if it does represent me, it represents me as something as inhumane or unwanted, like something to be forgotten about. And also the model minority myth, which is basically the myth that Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, are somehow a model minority. They are something to be looked up towards. They're almost white in a sense. And I really disagree with that statement because it pits us against other minorities. And the people who have created that myth are happy to do that. They are happy to see us fight over scraps, and I like dogs. And I say that because scraps is all we're ever going to get. My country has found joy in minimizing our chances of success through racism and legal legislation. And yet, like, I'm one of the luckier minorities. Like, there are other minorities, especially Black Americans, who have it so much worse. And it's not a contest, and yet we are pit against these other people who are struggling with us. And they're happy to do that. So I think it's really evil the way that America really demonizes minorities, and it's just awful. So no, I don't think America represents me, and I think that was an intentional choice. Why would I identify with a nation who is so keen or like happy to shove me in a corner or legislate me, like in Florida, like you can't say gay to kids? Like, that's so evil. Why do kids need to be protected from me? As someone who has worked with kids for a really long time and it was in education, like that's incredibly abhorrent. Like that's awful. I know Como and Kristen probably have a lot of thoughts about this, but I don't think this country represents me. I think this country would be happy to watch me go back to China, go back to where I came from. This country represents a lot of things, and I think hate is one of them. So no, I don't think this country represents me.
I also think that's something that's unique to sort of the, American
Immigrant
experience is this sort of, in only certain places can we be accepted. Like, we're so lucky and blessed to be in California, but had we been, born in a different state, the state of our lives could be so radically different. Like right now, what's going on with abortion rights, we as Californians are so lucky not to have, we're not really affected by that. But every other woman or anyone who can give birth in other states can be so severely affected by that. And it really comes down to who's in those states, who are the people in those states, what do they represent? And, in a lot of those states, they're racist, they represent hate. So it really just comes down to, I lost my train of thought. Kirsten, do you have anything to say?
Actually, that is 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I was trying to get my timer to go off so that the beep, beep, beep could do this job for me. But that was a wonderful first speech. That was 5 minutes, and we're going to hand it over to I Debate Rwanda, but don't worry, there will be lots more time for you, Kirsten. So I Debate, you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Hey guys, yeah, back again. Let me just set my timer so I can be aware of that too here. And yeah, guess I'll start. So thank you for the prepared speakers for the different perspectives we've heard from them. I guess I'll say, before I get into what I prepared, I'll talk about what like Sage said and what they said about like what are the aspects that make up a national identity. And the comments we receive different things like culture, language, food, dance, and also things like economic systems, politics, leadership. All that is something that I also agree with, that constitutes what national identity is. But I think that can also be lumped together with something different called national image or character. Basically, the different stereotypes or things we associate with different nations. And yeah, I think national identity, in my perspective, is mostly like which part of your being, your character, of yourself, you ascribe or you attribute to your country. And yeah, I think I'll get on with what I prepared. So I guess I'll say 3 things in this speech. Number 1, I'll talk about Rwanda. Number 2, I'll talk about globalization. Number 3, I'll talk about progress. So I guess I'll start with that. Personally, I view the phrase my country's national identity represents me is something that I disagree with. Now, part 1, Rwanda. I view national identities, which are defined by Oxford as a person's identity or self of belonging to one or more states or to more nations, to primarily serve like 2 different functions. Either is to combat external threats, or 2 is to increase like internal cohesion. So it is around the latter fact that Rwanda's national identity has been formed. Like after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi that claimed 1 million lives, Rwanda's main focus was to uproot the systemic divisionist rhetoric that threatened to consume our country. which birthed the development of like, among other reconciliation efforts, Ndumunyarwanda, which is like an ideological or mindset shift. And so like by emphasizing that the categories of Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa, which were nothing more than colonial devices, are there to divide us, to fracture a united, devoted, strong society, then we're able to realize that we are stronger and better by being united. And so for the generations alive during and right after the genocide, like aligning these fabricated divisions between these categories of Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa was the main obstacle, right? Like to adopting this Munyarwanda identity. However, for younger generations that I belong to, we've grown up in a time where like these ethnic divides have been obliterated or mainly diminished. And instead, while we didn't struggle, like all the generations, while they struggled with like, we're not different, that part of the mindset, we the younger generation struggle with, we're the same part, because what is that sameness? What is that culture? What is that language? What is that makes Rwanda Rwanda? And that is basically the condition of like cultural erasure being a main problem. And that's not a problem unique to Rwanda, it's shared across different nations. In fact, like the main goal that's been discussed of any post-colonial nation is redefining its identity and reclaiming this identity that's been removed from colonial times, the language that's been destructed, the cultural rituals and all these customs that we are like older generations understood, which the younger generations do not. Like that is the main issue we have. And so for that reason, I believe that while I would really want my identity to be based around my nation, this culture, these customs that's been erased, there is that definite fact that I do not identify by that. Instead, I go by many other things that I like or I'm interested by. Like, I'm interested in writing, so I'll be identified as a writer and all that. And so that's a problem exacerbated by like, this globalization and the advent of the internet, which like emphasizes creating, individual happiness and individual, growth and getting connected to people across the world, like as we're doing right now, to people you're interested around the same things. However, that does not do much to restore this national identity that's been lost. And lastly, talking about something that they were talking about on the other side, Laura was talking about like different ways the nation's oppression of them is something that causes you to not identify with the nation. And I think that's something that we might have too, right? Like sometimes while we have done a lot in terms of progress for women's rights in Rwanda and like minorities' rights, there's still a lot of work to be done. However, I think my time is about to be done, but like to conclude, I think there is hope and there's progress. And like, because we've moved on from such a horrible event and learned to unite around that, I think there's definitely that hope of progress into the different other facets of oppression. So that's kind of the stuff I was talking about on my side.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. All right, San Francisco Collective, you've got 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
I guess I'll start because I didn't speak last time. It's really great to be here. I want to say, I think one of the most important parts to me about the American identity is our value of diversity. I know not every American is gonna value diversity like I do, or like I'm sure the vast majority of people in this Zoom do. Like when I go to conservative majority spaces, I see a completely different understanding of the American identity. But I don't think that we should allow that idea of America to define America as a whole, because that ideology might not be the majority. In fact, I think if we poll the people in this room right now, I think probably everybody would say that they strongly value diversity. it as part of America. America is made up of diverse groups, and we all contribute to the American identity in our own way. And that makes America stronger, not weaker. I'm sure most people here would agree with that. I think queerness is a major part of the American identity. Even though there might not be as much historical reporting, we might not be taught about our history in schools, it's still been there. It's still always been there. And America is growing to accept and embrace queerness more and more. So I think also the fact that America has changed and grown so much in accepting these things is a testament to its strength as well. I don't know how much time we have left, but if folks want to respond to that.
I think one of America's strongest points, I guess, is the fact that, you know, we are the most diverse country in the world. Like, you will never find this type of diversity anywhere else. Especially, like, you know, the three of us who went through the public education system, like, that's something that, you know, can't be replicated anywhere else. However, I do think that it's really important to also think about how this sort of American identity can shape people, especially in consideration to not being able to feel like you fit within that American identity. Like Laura said before, like, you know, you always have to add when you're a person of color, like, you know, I'm Chinese American or I'm Asian American, you know, we can never sit here and say, well, I'm American, right? Because no one's going to sit here and say, well, you're not American, you're, you know, you're this American. And this sort of shaping of identity definitely changes depending on what ethnicity you are. For me, growing up in a post 9/11 society, I never felt like I could say I was American, because to everybody else, I wasn't. I was a terrorist. And I think being able to acknowledge that not everybody can, you know, sit here loud and proud and say, like, you know, I'm American because I was born and raised here, because no one else will agree with that statement, because to everybody else, we're not American. We're just people who happen to be born here, who happen to be raised here. But at the end of the day, because, you know, I'm brown, I'm not American. Laura, do you want to add anything?
It's like sickening. It's like, I also relate to that experience, especially with COVID happening. So many hate crimes happening against Chinese Americans in our own city. It's sickening, not in a good way, that our heritage is just like a coincidence, and an unfortunate one at that. I don't feel represented in America. America would be happy to watch me, to stick us all in California and say, oh, that's California. I don't think other states feel the way that we feel. And our queerness, our color, our ethnicity is something to be hated on rather than supported and uplifted like it should be, because it makes this country stronger and better. But not everybody feels that way.
Thank you, SF Collective, for really bringing us to an important question of like, who gets access to a national identity? I think that's a really important question. All right, kicking it back over to y'all, I Debate Rwanda.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so from the way I've heard, like the other perspectives, it seems as though like national identity for the previous speakers, they're saying like it represents them or it does not represent them, kind of basing on if it has positive ideals or like negative ideals. They're like, for example, if this value of diversity, because it's a good value, they're like, yes, this represents me. And for negative ideals, they're like, that doesn't represent me. But from the way I see it, like national identity it represents me if it has like influence in my like daily lived experience, all right. And like to represent me, it means like when you see me, like what stands out like about me, is it something that is tied to, you know, my nation, to my country, or is it something otherwise? And to like expand more on this, I'll talk about this idea like I saw from Yuval Noah Harari. um, is it an anthropologist? I don't know, something like that. So he basically talks about this idea of how like a national identity comes about. And you find, okay, specifically like here in Africa, I think it's like different from the US, because the US is like many people from different places coming together. But here you find like people, if you're somewhere, your ancestry is most likely to have come from that place, right? Like if I'm Rwandan, like if I go back in history, this place was for Rwandan people. And you find that in the beginning there was like tribes, and you find that when tribes are not able to solve, like when some problems go beyond the level or the power of a tribe, that's when you start to find like collections of tribes which end up becoming states. But okay, maybe that's not the case for like every single scenario, because we also have cases where like colonization lumped together like different tribes, even though they didn't kind of like have a consensus on becoming a state. But you do see that like a nation kind of serves a purpose of solving problems that no tribe can solve individually. And then there comes this idea of a national identity when people who are strangers, I can say, like from different tribes, like start collaborating. This national identity is born, and their lives stop being only about their tribes, because usually you find that each and every single aspect of your life, from I don't know, marriage, from like economic means, everything is really about your tribe, right? Like it has a big influence on that. Now if it stops being about your tribe, you start kind of losing that tribal identity and gain this whole national identity, which is kind of a little bit more diluted. And then you take it to another level where we have this um global identity uh, that comes about from different things, right? There is the intercultural exchange. Okay, our education systems are not necessarily national, right? They're all like, you know, borrowed, and like the media around us, like the things that shape my daily lifestyle as an individual, there is not much that's exclusively Rwandan. So when I see myself, like the first thing I see, like Joe, like Benjamin had been saying, is not as a Rwandan, right? It's more of, let's say, as a writer, or as a person who likes science or something like that. Like these cross-cutting, I can say, um, yeah, kind of things. Not more so of like something national. So I find that it's not maybe that my country has positive ideals or like negative ideals that I choose to say that it represents me. It's because there is nothing exclusively random that significantly has an influence on me that would make me say that, you know, what represents me is actually my national identity. Yeah, and yeah, that's basically the general idea I want to share. But also, you find that as you come from, you go into the a greater level, right? Like from the tribal identity to the national identity, there seems to be an increase in this idea of individualism, right? Like the state is not what matters. What matters is, let's say, the happiness of the individual and all that. But that being said, also there's still like I can say a uniqueness to me as Rwandan, or even like as the general African continent, because we have shared struggles, shared histories that still do play like in our daily lives, right? That affect the opportunities we get, even though it is influenced like by, you know, global influences. We still have this identity. So to some extent, I do see it in my life. I can't say I'm exactly the same as other people, but I don't think it stands out, is what I want to say. Yeah, so that's basically my view on it.
Thank you so much for bringing another like completely sort of different aspect and perspective to this conversation. I really, really appreciate that. All right, back to San Francisco Collective. You've got 5 minutes.
I think you must be really lucky to be feeling like at home in your country. And in America, I don't think that's the way a lot of people feel, especially immigrants, because we don't have that sense of tribe community because that tribe was interrupted, or it's un-American to still feel, warm, fuzzy thoughts about your country, your home country. For example, like my grandparents, they immigrated here to America from China. And at the time, they were political refugees, right? Like it was not a good time. It was not a good country. And yet they still feel like they're Chinese rather than American. And they're not really allowed to feel that way. Like people are like, go back to your country if you feel that way. We're not allowed to have that kind of community with other immigrants where we can feel those warm fuzzy thoughts for our country, our home country, and still be proud to be American. That's not a narrative that really happens here. And Como was saying a lot of things about 9/11, especially about how that brings another dimension when like an action of one, like an extremist, speaks for everyone. And then even more people want you to like go back to a country that you were never born in. We don't have that sense of tribal community because even if we were born here, it was like, well, you weren't really born here. Like you were kind of almost stolen in a sense that, we didn't get this chance. And I think, Komal, did you want to say some more on this?
Yeah. This sort of idea of not having any place to belong, whether it be America, whether it be our own, home country, it's a lot of these feelings of, well, neither place wants us. For me specifically in India, there are constant genocides against people of my religion because we're a religious minority. So there's constant attacks on us, which involves killing, which involves sabotaging agricultural fields, sort of stopping food, stopping commerce, stopping everything to be able to sabotage this whole state so we don't have access to anything outside. So it's very loudly there where people who are sick aren't welcome. So if I'm not welcome in India and over here I'm just, being called a terrorist, where do I belong in this situation? Neither place wants me. And this is, a feeling that a lot of immigrants have of, well, one place doesn't want me, either being considered, traitors, or why did you leave? I know the current Indian prime minister said, if you left to America, then you don't belong here anymore. You are a traitor. You wanted to leave, so you don't get to come back. So even now, people like, my parents who were born and raised in India are not allowed back to the country they were born in because the prime minister said, well, you wanted to leave, so you stay where you are. You don't get to get a visa now. And even now, like, okay, we don't have a place to go back to. Let's just stay here. But what does staying here entail? It's all having to stand here and withstand all these racist remarks, having to still continue to be a religious minority, which involves, our place of worship constantly being harassed, whether it be by the police, whether it be by people who just don't understand it or just choose to vandalize it. Not even last year, someone tried to set our temple on fire. So in that situation, where do we belong? We don't have that sense of belonging. There is nowhere for us to go. So how can we sit here and say, well, yes, I do have a national identity, or yes, I have one that represents me? There is nothing that can represent us because no one wants us. Did I run out of time?
You're about to run out of time, but if you'd like to make one more point, I'll allow it.
Oh my God, you'll allow my point. To be able to have this sense of belonging, we need to be able to, create a space where we feel like we can belong. But no matter what we do or how we try and do it, it'll never be considered, the safe place, because no one will let us create that safe place.
Yeah, thank you, Komal. I think that's a really poignant place to end there, right? So thinking about who has access to a national identity, and then also thinking about like, what does a national identity serve, right? Like home, belonging, community. These were things that we talked about in that very first piece. And so, yeah, who gets access to them? All right, back to you, I Debate Rwanda. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, let me set a timer so I don't go overboard. Just a sec. Okay, yeah. So let's start by actually sort of like commenting on what I'm not sure how to pronounce. I think it's Kristen said, talking about how like America has a way of like valuing diversity and actually embracing it. But like although like okay,
Is Enoch frozen for other folks? Okay. All right, let's hope he comes back. Okay.
hello, I'm back. So was an issue.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we
anyway,
lost.
I was saying on just talking about like diversity, and then just like linking it back to like what Laura was saying. Although you may have this view, it's not just like about like when maybe you're in America, maybe you can have this sort of like view that maybe they in some areas like they value diversity, but then I feel like a part of a country's national identity is also like their media output and like how the media views them, right? So if everybody outside, such as us, for example, such as during the George Floyd protests and all these different things, if we're seeing like this side of America that doesn't really value diversity and is actually going like has this other different view, then there's that aspect as well that I feel like we need to consider when we look at how the national identity actually represents you. And then so that's just like a comment on like what she said, just to say that like the country's national identity is also always shown in the media. So although you might say one thing, the media itself can be showing something different. And I think that's what we saw a lot during like the George Floyd protests and during different things. Like today talking about like abortion and all these different things. Like maybe it doesn't value those people that want to go through with abortions and want to do these different things. But on to my view is a bit mixed, so my speech is gonna have like two different things. Um, so firstly, it's like what truly defines national identity. National identity is defined as, a nation as a cohesive whole represented by traditions, culture, and language. Although this may be the dictionary definition and is how national identity is viewed within the country itself, I believe like the foreign outlook on what national identity is almost always a completely different thing. For almost always, for national identity to represent you, everyone looking on must base their perception of that identity on like that culture, language, and tradition. But unfortunately, the world we live in today is not like a united front. And I don't mean like militarily or financially, but in the sense that we base a country's identity in those things, in those like culture, in culture, tradition, and language, because a lot of the time we realize that we don't actually know these cultures and these languages of these different places or their traditions. So we end up basing national identity off stereotypes and historical events, for example, rather than what we rather than what actually marks their identity, because I think we can all agree that that's not really what marks their identity. So an example could, like, for example, include Germany, right? So like Germany has arguably been the cause for like 2 world wars and the origin of like the Holocaust and anti-Semitic views. But the people in Germany, like the people born in Germany today, have little to no connection to these historical events that the world usually links to Germany. So, and for example, like the genocide against the Tutsi that took place in Rwanda 28 years ago is recorded as one of the worst genocides to ever happen in the 20th century. So just like Germany, the children born in Rwanda today are not directly linked to this heinous act that took place 3 decades ago. So there is no universal definition of identity when it comes to all 193 countries in the world. So then this means a national identity is left up to the to definitions that can be either positive or negative. And the fact that something as important as national identity is left up to interpretation and speculation, it cannot be used as a strong means or like a feasible means to represent someone accurately. As representation always means something that representation always means something different to someone else. So for example, me born in Rwanda, one person may look at me as, you know, as a strong and resilient person who is a descendant of, like, you know, a victim of the genocide, while someone else may look at me as maybe heartless and damaged for being maybe the descendant of a perpetrator or something like that. So I think what I mean to say is national identity, it's really left up to the interpretation of someone, and then that interpretation can always be positive or negative. But I think when you look at it in the aspect of tradition and culture and language, I believe it's a positive thing, and my national identity does represent me in that way, because the cultures, I believe my culture is very positive and tradition is very positive. But when you look at these other factors such as like history and all this, which is usually what the world is going to consider, it ends up being negative or positive depending on the history that you do know. So thank you. That is my view on it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the bringing in of the conversation about media and like the perspective, the sort of like global perspective, as opposed to just like the interpersonal perspective of how you feel specifically. So brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, SF Collective, this will be your last speech. You have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Okay, I think you made some really great points. And I do agree that, you know, national identity is kind of what you make of it. But in America, the people who get the chance to say, like, to make what it is, are not really the people that it truly represents. There's kind of the joke that, like, if you're not a straight white man, you're not going to get anything done, which I feel is truly represents the people that truly represent America are straight white people, and like very old straight white people, like about to die men. And that doesn't really represent America. So while you did make a really great point about media and like how, you know, normal people can understand that there's differences and there, you know, people like us actually exist, we don't have that representation in media. If we do, it's something bad. Like when I hear about Chinese Americans in the news, it's because someone like killed us. Like it's not really like we have one movie that people talk about. Like except in our culture, we don't really have a place to feel safe or represented. Like we have to make that on our own. But even when we do, it's not a part of like national identity. It's like a tourist place. Like growing up, I used to love going to Chinatown with my grandparents. And then when I got older and I saw how gentrified and like taken over it got, it made me really sad. So even when we make these safe spaces, they're not really safe from capitalism, from being taken over. And even in religious places like temples, like I see like some places have gift shops or some people are selling things, you know. And not only is it like sacrilegious, it's incredibly disrespectful. But also sometimes that's the only place that's the only way that we can make these spaces last is to to go with emotions. And I think it's really sad. Komal, do you have any thoughts? Or Kristen, do you have any thoughts? Yes, the appropriation. And who can appropriate what and get away with it. That's who that's who makes the national identity. It's not the people they're appropriating. Like the vernacular of so many Black Americans, like slang, that represents a huge part of what people talk about. And yet we don't get credit for that. And yet we're legislating to minimize the success of Black and Brown Americans, who are creating this culture that we appropriate and steal and profit off of. It's totally evil. Okay, Como was saying, let me speak.
Oh, I was sorry. Going off of like this sort of appropriation, it's where our culture is only seen when white people have something to do with it. When they wear it, when they talk about it, then it's seen as something, worth looking at. Like when it comes to like traditional Indian jewelry, people like thought it was like gaudy until Bridgerton came out. Now we have, places like Shein that are mass producing them instead of people buying it from like, small business owners or like from traditional makers. And this idea of, our cultures don't mean anything unless they're marketable comes across in so many different ways, where people will like look at us in public and be like, if we're wearing our traditional wear, be like, oh, like what are they doing? They're suspicious. Or like, I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to go to Costco wearing, traditional wear because we ran out of something at my temple and we have so many people staring. And then now we have a security guard following us because it's like, this person, that bag looks suspicious, And, a lot of times where it's like, we don't feel represented in any shape, way, or form really comes across in the way we see our policies, where a lot of our policies are geared towards like, Christians, where we only get off on Christian holidays. And if we try and, take space for our own holidays, it's suddenly like, yours isn't valid. You shouldn't be celebrating it. You should still come to work, And it's also this huge, I want to call it like a pandemic of just not pandemic, endemic of ignorance that we have clouding America, where it's like nobody else exists unless you're white, Christian, and a man. Those are the only people that exist, the only people who are allowed to have an opinion. And it's so like ingrained into America's system that you can just see it at every single stop. I mean, honestly, if you were to ask any white man, what is a Sikh, they would not be able to answer you, despite it being the 5th most prevalent religion in the world. Kirsten, would you like to add anything?
I think our time is up.
Our time is up. If you'd like to make, like a 30-second or less kind of final contribution, Kirsten, though, I'd love to give you that space.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I guess I'm all about like when I see something unacceptable, I don't accept it. And I think a lot of people being Como and Laura have brought up amazing points about America's big problems, especially with immigration, and how anti-immigration attitudes have been running deep in American culture, and why that is a major problem. And I completely don't accept that view of America. That is not America. The people who, maybe it's the people who believe that shit that actually are American and don't actually understand what America should be all about,
Yeah. I really appreciate that gentle moment of rage, Kirsten. I agree. And I also appreciate the just reminder that no one and nothing is safe from capitalism. So thank you, SF Collective. I appreciate that. All right, I debate. You've got one more speech left. 5 minutes whenever you are ready. We can't wait to hear from you.
Hi again. I'll be, using this device because mine. Yeah. So I'll first off go back to like a comment that I saw in the chat by Priscilla Lee. She talked about how in America people call her Chinese, but she's not Chinese. But when she's back home, people call her an American because of like that whole culture. So eventually, that's not something that is unique to minorities in America. It's something that is experienced by very many diaspora people. For instance, you go to college abroad, and then like you have to adopt a specific traits in order for you to fit in, to be able to like talk right, in order for you to like get food or something else. But then when you come back, you've already like absorbed some of aspects of a different culture. And when you come back, you're identified as an American. So basically on a spectrum of existence, minorities and minorities in any angle are placed in a dilemma of like not belonging anywhere. They do not belong home, but at the same time they do not belong where they reside. So I will start my speech with this quote from the essay of Stuart Hall of cultural identity and diaspora, where he defined identity as a matter of becoming. So I believe that this is this is tied to prioritizing self-integrity, where you have to be honest, where being honest with oneself before owing anything to the world is the right type of attitude, right? But with honesty comes this whole notion of truth, which is something that the previous speakers have been talking about, who owns a right to to have the right opinion, right, in their context. So I have very many questions on this. So what is truth in the first place? And in a way that is it true that gay people are evil, as many children are told? Is it right to oppress those who don't want to conform to gender norms? So I believe that it is a right to like redefine what we see as the universal truth. But at the end of the day, we still face the problem of that whole spectrum. We're still in the middle, right? So there are always going to be extremists, right? So there are also going to be like people who obey, like who are really tied to like the national identity, those we call the chauvinists. And then there are also those who are going to like make sure that we increase the check boxes for each and every way of like identifying yourself. But at the end of the day, who stops that? And should we even stop in the first place? So there's always this whole thing of national identity is really important in a way of like you being identified with your own people, but there is an extent to which like you do not identify with them, and where you draw the line and start like another whole like check boxes. Where do you stop? And who dictates that? So negative side of the resolution, where number one, I do acknowledge the power of like, sovereignty, being able to you have like a whole group of people are fighting. This, the view, the current then give us a broader understanding of two main things that I would love to like. One, the views of underrepresented, minority groups that fail to identify themselves with the common values, that they may become situated in the dominant systems of representation and become more prone to the effects of critical exercise of cultural power and normalization. So we all know that, minority groups are all, like, movements all stand for like, stopping normalization, stop normalizing that there is only female or male. There are other check boxes. Stop normalizing that there's only straight people, all those kinds of stuff. But at the same time, that whole thing of setting the standards of validation, silencing some voices, silencing these points of views just because they're coming from a point or they're coming from somebody who makes that society uncomfortable, right? So number one, we silence potential opportunities, right? So the moment we see something so abstract, just because it's different from what we are used to, make us lose on an opportunity for a potential project that could cases of like trans people are denied opportunities just because they are trans, and various trans people who are given a pass just because they are trans enough. So at the end of it all, like the whole thing of like who holds the power of truth, who holds the power of like who you are, what you should be, and what you aim to become is still a problem. And where do we draw the line? And even if you assign yourself that power, where will you stop? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And please join me in giving a huge round of applause to all of our speakers today: Enoch, Joel, Benjamin, Audrey, Mugisha, Komal, Kirsten, and Laura, for a wonderful, incredibly thought-provoking, especially this last point about who holds the power of truth. I'm going to be thinking about that for a really long time to come. So huge round of applause. Thank you so much to our speakers. So what we would really love to do now is give y'all 10 minutes to kind of talk back and forth to each other. So what questions do you have, speakers, SF Collective speakers and iDebate Rwanda speakers, what questions do you have for each other? And what do you think about this conversation? What are some of the really wild kind of differences between our perspectives, and also some of the similarities? Where do you agree? What kind of points are hard for you to understand, etc.? So I'm going to give y'all 10 minutes to talk to each other.
Y'all really feel represented by a country? That blows my mind. And Mugisha, you made some great points. I don't know, Benjamin, what do you think?
I had a lot of thoughts. I don't know. By end of consuming the text. Just kidding. Okay, so yeah, I guess first off, I was thinking about how you mentioned America being the most diverse nation. I'd like to link that. It's Kumal who was saying this, I think, and then link that to what she said about also cultural appropriation and who deems certain things more important and what's seen as yeah, I get that. So I bring that back to the case of many African nations like DRC, for example, a neighboring country, is one of the most linguistically diverse nations in the world. In fact, it has over 200 languages, but of all of those, a lot are relevant and not spoken, and part of that comes from cultural erasure. And yeah, that's kind of the whole point of your language. Your culture is only seen as important if white people decide that or something like that, which I think is something we relate to. Okay, so I had kind of something that repeated around the whole debate of minorities and all that. And yeah, I think I definitely like how Laura was acknowledging how it's good to live in a country where you're welcomed and all that. But I'd like to point out that minorities exist everywhere. You come to Rwanda, there's still certain rampant issues. There's still misogyny, there's still colorism, still homophobia, there's still class struggles, there's still a lot of different issues, right? Now, a lot of that can even be argued to stem from this sort of Rwandan identity, right? But if you came to Rwanda, you would see these problems, yet I kind of want to push back on that affecting your view of national identity, because here's why you should let that remove your national identity. One, it's not necessarily baked into that nation. Certain racist remarks include telling people, oh, your culture was barbaric and it didn't include inclusion for women, it didn't have, this equality and all that. And sometimes you have to push back on that and say, no, I think my culture had a lot of inclusion that has been raised and reshaped as being quote unquote barbaric or something. But in fact, there wasn't, in fact, equality and all that. And sometimes though, as in the case of many times, you'll find that yes, there's a lot of dodgy sort of remaining big issues which your cultural identity does not account for, right? Like, for example, if I'll take the US as an example, right? While it positions itself as like freedom for all, baked into the US history and like everything about it was slavery and like a very blatantly unequal, racial terrain. So there's that, right? Sometimes baked into your country's history is this division. But I think by focusing on that and the fact that these systemic issues still exist, by making that erase your cultural or national identity, that takes a big part out of it, the joy you feel out of the good parts of your culture. And so I really think that it's good to take your national identity as the best attributes there are. Freedom is inherently very good. A lot of people take that freedom to mean very few people, like few, as you say, cis-het old white men who have that power, as in have that actual freedom. But at its core, American freedom and all the ideals it pushes for are good. And so I think you shouldn't let that go. Instead, fight who says, as Audrey was saying, who gets to define that freedom? Fight that, not the national identity itself. But I don't know, those are just my thoughts. Sorry for taking up a lot of time.
No, I totally love it, Benjamin. And you're totally right. There are, good parts to being in America, and I kind of talked about it beforehand, but like my parents came to America because this was a land of opportunity. I think that's what everybody associates America with, right? Like especially immigrant parents. But we kind of learned that that's not really true. That there's like this meritocracy where it's like if you work hard, you'll get your like slice of life. You'll get like the 2 kids, the 2 cars, to get a home. And that's just not true, especially for minorities. Like in a lot of places, it was illegal for you to be Black and to own a home, or you couldn't buy a home in its neighborhood. The same for, Chinese Americans, or you couldn't get a job, or you couldn't get this, or you couldn't get that. Just exclusion, and it was written into our laws. So, while it's yes, there are freedoms, and being free is inherently a good thing, but it comes at a cost, and there's only really that freedom for some people. Like, I can never hold hands with my partner and not wonder if someone's going to say something. Like, even in San Francisco, like that's always on my mind. And that's not a freedom that I have. Like, that's a freedom someone else has. And, it sucks. I don't know what more to say. I don't know. I'm sure Kristen has some really great thoughts about this when she was talking about queerness, that, it's part of America, but we don't talk about it. We actively try to hide it. Kristen, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Like, I definitely hear you. Like, seeing like pictures of like straight couples proposing in public and being like, oh, like, I don't know if I would feel safe doing that, like in a queer situation. Like, I've also seen photographs of queer people proposing in public, and like, yes. But like in the back of my mind, like, it was at a risk. Like, could somebody have said something, or worse, started a fight, to make that situation, what's supposed to be one of the best moments of your life, suddenly feel very unsafe. So yeah, I totally I completely feel that point you made.
Audrey, did you have something to say?
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to like the point that Joe made in his first speech. He talked about, national identity serving two main purposes. The first one, which is the one that I wanted to emphasize more on, of combating external threats, right? So if it is about combating external threats, national identity is something that is now, subjected to external, opinions and, identification, right? So do you really think that national identity, or you being identified as an American or as a Rwandan, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that in the external world, not just like within the country, at the airport or other international places?
That's a really good point, Audrey. I feel like it's kind of sad, but in America, I feel like we are the threat. Like the otherness, like I think of like American, I think of like apple pie, I think of like white people, and I think of like protecting the children from like the other, like from brown people, from Chinese people, from Black people. Like the threat is otherness, is us, and they don't want us to be part of that narrative or part of that culture because we're not welcome. Like we're very violent against minorities and against especially immigration. Like my parents were really lucky to come here at the time they did. They came at like the golden period, but like not everybody is that lucky. So like having a strong national identity, I think we have one. I just don't think that I'm part of it. I don't think they want me to be part of it. And I think that it's like a very violent, white, straight narrative. Like it's not nice.
But I will say this, Audrey, what you said earlier about like, being able to claim, like say that like, well, I'm American at things like the airport. It does definitely like, as Americans, we do have, certain privileges of where we can enter a lot of countries without having a visa because of this sort of idea that because we're already American, we're not going to want to stay at other people's countries. We have an ability to like enter places, wherever we want. So, being able to say like, my nationality is like, I am an American does definitely have, we're privileged, especially when compared to other countries. Like, I'm just gonna go with India. Like if I was born in India, my life would be like radically different than my life here in America. And, despite a lot of the problems we do have in America, we are, there are a lot of things we are lucky to have, like being able to say like, oh, we have a public education system. It's not a good one, but we have one. The one good point of America that the only thing I can think about, the fact that our dollar has spending power. We have certain privileges that other countries don't have, and we are very lucky to have those. But when it comes down to like identity, I feel like those things can be like separated into a different category. When we're just talking about identity, I feel like we're just talking about how we feel as Americans. And I feel like it really goes back to what Laura was saying about this, we're looked at as the other. Because if we, take all of this, like comparing ourselves to other countries, how is it when we live here? That perspective like changes radically because, although we're privileged to have certain things, it's never going to reach that sort of privilege as a white person has, So I think comparing ourselves to like, well, at least we're not them, to let me collect my thoughts. Yeah, like we shouldn't sit here and be like, well, at least we're not them, because that's not the baseline that we want to have. Why aren't we treated fully as Americans when that's what we are? Yeah. Laura, would you like to add anything?
We
Oh,
have
you're all good.
come to about 10 minutes. If there's no other burning kind of comments to make among the panelists, I'd love to just get a general, are there any questions from the audience? Anyone that would like to kind of pop into the conversation here, ask a question, give a comment, give your perspective? How's it going for you, audience? What do you think? Jean-Michel.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I think for me, it's just an observation that I think is quite interesting. I think that on the last question that Audrey had asked about identity not just being internal, but then also external. I also think that one of the ways that it was easy to see from the conversation is the way that even the way that we understand identity is shaped by nationality. Americans have a very distinct way of viewing themselves as individuals. So part of what you will notice is everybody wants to be seen as a distinct and unique individual. And the interesting thing is that is so American. Like, it is very American because in every culture, the individual is not as important as the collective. So even though sometimes people see, well, I don't see myself as part of a nation or nationality, but sometimes we're blind to the way that we understand the world, and the way that we're shaped is actually very much American. Or very much from the places that we are, right? It is the questions that you ask, the thoughts that you have are shaped. They might not be totally coming from the culture, but it's also the ability to question and the ability to view yourself distinctly is purely American. And another thing that I also thought was interesting is also seeing the process that is happening around the world. So in America, one of the things that is happening is this people are moving away from this idea that there is such a thing as an American identity, and that is good questioning. What does it mean to be American? And it's interesting because even for many of us, even in our languages, when we hear an American, we say Muzungu, which is a white person. Like, you would never associate American with a Black person, right? But we talk about African American, Asian American, but we never talk about white America, right? So America is really redefining itself, going from a nation, asking ourselves, taking what we had taken for granted as this is what it means to be American, and then now questioning that. And then also, but all over the world, though, you're finding that there's also a movement, especially in Rwanda, for example, that is because of what we might call identity politics and the role that identity politics has played in conflicts. People are trying to move away from identity politics to build nation states identity, or an identity that supersedes all other identities. So it's an interesting thing, because I feel like America is being drawn towards identity politics while everyone else is moving away from identity politics. And I think it will be interesting to see how it goes, and to see how all of it is formed. I think that what I have found sometimes on both extremes is both extremes are bad. So this idea that you're only your identity is also bad, that because otherwise we need every society needs some sort of an identity that supersedes the individual identity. And then also the other thing that you're only part of a group, and no, it's not true. So I think I call as individual identities and collective identities, and that's what makes it hard. Right? Like that's what makes it hard in every people.
Oh no. Okay. Let's see. I was hoping it would resolve itself. Oh no, we lost Jean-Michel completely. Ah, well, that was a collection of so many important and amazing thoughts, and hopefully Jean-Michel will be able to join us back and hear perhaps maybe some. I see Teddy's hand, so maybe a gentle response.
Oh, I just, you know, I think I appreciate, Sage, what you had said earlier about having a moment to kind of sit and process and reflect. And so one of the things as a debate coach, and I really appreciate about hearing all of these speakers, is how much the format of debate itself can, I think, in sometimes people's minds really close down conversation, because we have this assumption that debate is always aggressive, or it's antagonist, or it's always pointing out how this person is wrong and I'm right, and that, you know, kind of speaks to a certain kind of individualism that maybe Jean-Michel was talking about before. But one of the things that I think is really impressive about the debate that we just watched is that the format can be exactly the opposite, which is that when one sits down with a group of people and one has a certain kind of timed response to any question, but particularly a question that is as loaded, as powerful, and as complex as national identity, and then display that in between two kinds of imagined but also false communities, between the construct of Rwanda and the construct of the United States, that debate itself is also one of the ways of thinking through that complexity. And so even though I think each of the debaters had such an incredible, not only amount of knowledge and processing and history and personal experience, but I feel really privileged as an audience member to get to see that kind of revelation in action. And so, you know, just mad props to everybody on this call, because I think it demonstrates the very best of what debate can offer, which isn't to shut down conversation, but it's actually to open it up and take us into entirely different places of both critical reflection and connectivity. So thanks to everybody for all of that.
Thank you so much, Teddy. Absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Comments? Anything anyone else would like to add?
It was very lovely to debate with you all. You guys brought fantastic points.
It was truly, genuinely a pleasure to get to watch. Oh, we've got a question. We have got a question in the chat. All right. It says, we've mentioned a lot about the negative aspects of American culture, but are there any positive aspects that you agree with?
I feel like some, yeah. Well, Laura said it's not illegal to be gay here. It's hard to be gay. It's not illegal though. And also, like I said earlier, I think, you know, the fact that we do have a public education system, because in a lot of other countries, you have to pay to go to school, whether it be like elementary, middle school, high school, you know, it's something that is more of an investment versus here where it's like, well, it's not the best, but you do get free education here. You do, like Laura said in the chat, you have human rights. We have good infrastructure. If you take apart,
We have good public transportation.
yeah.
Like what she said about, yeah, we have democracy. We have the ability to vote for our representatives. You can call your senator and they will send you something back. It's like very generic, but they will send you something back.
You will get a response.
Like every time. Yeah, you will get a response. You can make a petition. You
can protest.
You can protest. You might get arrested, but you have the right to a speedy trial. There are a lot of things that are really great about being American that are like that are for every American, like the Constitution, like the right to a speedy trial. Like, oh, bro, do you know how many like people and like lives that saved? Like, we can talk about bail bonds and stuff, but like the right to a speedy trial is something that you like protects all Americans. The right to freedom of speech, like my grandparents, they have WeChat, like they have to say like we'll send this stuff to the government, to the Chinese government, because we're in America. Like they have to disclose that. They have to disclose it on every app. Like that's amazing. That's like so grateful for that. It's nice being an American. Also, I do like cheese, Priscilla. I like vegan cheese.
We also have the freedom of religion. You know, that's something that's unfortunately kind of, you know, when comparing other places, like great that we have that. Despite certain individuals like approach to other people's religion, we do have the right to practice our own religions, which is fantastic. Can't do that in India, but I can do it here. Kirsten, do you have any points?
What good things about American culture? I personally feel like I'm more identified with California specifically than America, because I've lived here my whole life and so have both of my parents. So I really only feel like I can talk about California specifically. And I would say like the environment, our love for nature and wanting to protect nature, like protesting against climate destruction, I think is a very American thing. And of course, the flip side of that is some Americans don't even believe in climate change, and yeah, also just trying to protect natural spaces. I feel like that's a very Californian thing, or at least in the communities that I've grown up in, it is.
We have less outward corruption.
Oh no, I unmuted right at the wrong time. Less outward corruption. Audrey, I see your hand.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to like shed more light on like what the situation is here in Rwanda. So in terms of corruption, I think we actually did a really great job. And so a national identity, what it helped us with is number one, to fight the whole thing of divisionism. But at the end of the day, it just brought back, it's still like, since we're a country that is still under rebuilding, I believe that it is important. It is mostly important at this moment, since we are, still in that first generation after the genocide against the Tutsi, and it's helping like build that sense of, collaboration with everybody, and there is collective effort in each and every sector to make sure that we all achieve one desired goal, which is defined, the desired goal is also defined by various plans, one that may be, aligned with the 2063, African Union plan, but at the same time also, as a nation, we have, plans as well. So if national identity, like, even though it may bring, some voices that are silenced, the minorities who do not identify with a certain aspect of, like, in the political pool or the economic pool, is still a tool for Rwandans to be able to collectively, strive for a main goal, something that was lost for long since colonization. And it's also something that is helping us to smoothly go through the decolonization process, because it is our way to, like, redefine who we are as a, as an African nation, apart from, like, the certain characteristics that we were bestowed on by our previous colonial masters. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Audrey. Really, really important points there. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, what an incredible conversation. I'm just feeling like so lucky to be able to, like, take it all in and hear from everyone. The chat is also popping off if you haven't gotten a chance to go look over there. Lots of really interesting points being made there as well. Are there any other questions from the audience or any last comments that we'd like to make in this space while we have it? All right, and that feels like a sufficiently awkward teacher pause. So I will just say again, thank you so incredibly much to iDebate Rwanda for being here with us. Thank you to the speakers from the SF Collective. This is Nathan and I are constantly talking about how much we love this event and how we always are looking forward to it every year. We can't wait to do it again next year. I'm so glad that all of you were able to be here to experience it with us. Just what an incredible, like, truly intercultural experience. Adelph, do you want to say anything on the way out?
Yeah, I will. I just want to thank everyone that made it today. And it is a great pleasure for me to say a few words at the end of this discussion. I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to co-host this event together with you guys. And thank you so much to our speakers today for providing thoughts, provoking insights and arguments. It was a really good discussion. Like, I learned a lot. And I don't really have much to say, just for the sake of time, since it's getting really late over here. But now I would have this. Now that we're at the end of this discussion, I'd like to express my warmest thanks to the organizers and participants. And a special thank you goes to Nathaniel and Sage. Thank you so much for helping me. Without your assistance, this event would not have been possible to arrange. So, like, thank you so much. And yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much who are in Rwanda for staying up late for us. I really deeply appreciate it. Can't wait to do this again. Can't wait to keep this conversation going. Thank you to everyone. And I hope you have a really wonderful day or night. Bye, everyone.